For thousands of years, the galaxy believed the dead planet of Eris 9 was nothing more than a cold, abandoned world. Silent deserts, frozen oceans, cracked stone, no atmosphere, no life, no energy, just a forgotten rock drifting through space like a grave that no one cared about. And for generations, no species bothered to visit it because there was nothing there, nothing to study, nothing to harvest, nothing to fear, until one quiet cycle when a small alien research ship named the Luma drifted into its orbit, carrying a crew of peaceful scientists from the Zalorian race, explorers known for curiosity rather than war, and they scanned the planet casually, expecting the usual results: no life, no movement, no heat. And the readings came back empty at first, just like every ancient file said they would, and the crew relaxed, talking softly, laughing, even believing this mission would be simple and boring. But then something strange happened. Something so small at first that no one noticed. A tiny flicker on the scanner. A microscopic rhythmic pulse that appeared for less than a second and vanished. And one of the junior scientists frowned, thinking it was just a glitch. But then the pulse returned, stronger this time, clearer, repeating every 2 seconds like a slow drumbeat, and the scientist leaned closer to the monitor, his voice shaking as he whispered, "Is that a signal?" And the room grew quiet as the crew turned toward the screen, watching the pulse repeat again and again. And the captain ordered a deep scan, zooming into the planet's crust, through the dead stone layers, through the frozen mantle, deeper and deeper until the scanner reached the core. And that was when the entire crew froze in horror, because the pulse wasn't random, wasn't mechanical interference, wasn't radiation, it was a heartbeat. At first no one spoke, every mouth hanging open, every eye wide, because a heartbeat meant life. And life inside the core of a dead planet was impossible. Yet the scanner repeated the reading over and over, each pulse stronger than the last. And the captain felt a cold shiver climb his spine as he whispered, "What creature can survive inside a core?" But the answer that returned from the analysis system made the room colder than space itself, because the readout displayed a terrifying classification: biological, humanoid, unidentified, meaning whatever was inside was not animal, not alien, not artificial, but something built like them, something shaped like a person. And the younger crew members started trembling, whispering the word no one wanted to say out loud: human. For centuries the galaxy believed humans were gone, extinct, erased from existence. A species that vanished from every map, every signal, every record, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. But now something in the core of Eris 9 beat like a giant heart, proving that humanity was not gone at all, only hidden, only sleeping. And the captain's hands shook as he ordered a full biological scan. And when the results appeared, the crew gasped, because the size of the heartbeat was massive, not the size of a normal human, not the size of a creature, but something enormous, something hundreds of meters across, like a being too large to be natural. And one scientist whispered in terror, "No human is that big." But another responded with a trembling voice, "Unless it's not one heartbeat, it's many beating together." That thought poisoned the air with fear, and suddenly everyone imagined millions of humans fused in silence beneath the surface, alive, waiting, listening. The ship's lights flickered, the systems glitched, and the scanners surged with more data. Heat rising deep underground, slight vibration in the tectonic plates, magnetic fields shifting, like the planet itself was reacting to the scan. And one crew member backed away from the monitor, whispering, "We shouldn't be here." But curiosity overpowered caution, and the captain ordered an audio pickup, trying to hear the source of the heartbeat. And when the speakers activated, what they heard was not a simple thump, but a layered echo, like countless synchronized beats forming one massive rhythm. Slow, steady, ancient, as if something beneath the planet was sleeping, not dead, sleeping. And the sound made every hair on every body stand on end, forcing their hearts to race. And then without warning the heartbeat changed, speeding up slightly, as if responding to their presence, and panic spread through the crew as alarms blared, reading seismic movement, meaning something inside the core was shifting, waking, aware. The captain tried to cancel the scan, but the system froze, and suddenly a burst of energy shot from the planet, crashing into the ship like a wave, shaking the hull, tossing equipment across the room, knocking scientists to the floor. And then the ship's computers went dark, plunging them into silence and cold emergency lighting. And in that haunting dim glow a single message appeared on the screen: written in a language no alien had spoken in thousands of years, Terran English, and the words were simple, short, and terrifying. Do not wake us. The room fell into absolute stillness, every breath held, every mind paralyzed with confusion and fear, because extinct species do not send warnings, extinct species do not monitor planets, extinct species do not speak, and the fact that the message was written in ancient human language meant something was alive down there, something aware, something intelligent, something that understood the intrusion, and that message did not feel like a threat, but a command, a law, a truth delivered from something beyond comprehension. The captain's hands shook uncontrollably as he whispered, "Who sent that?" But deep down he already knew the answer. They all did, and the younger scientist who first noticed the pulse whispered the unthinkable, "Humans?" But before he could finish his words, the ship's engines roared to life on their own, auto-navigation activating without any command, dragging the ship backward away from the planet as if being pushed by an invisible force. And the crew clung to walls and chairs as the ship jerked violently until they drifted into safe orbit, and then everything stopped. Movement, alarms, heartbeat, message. Everything went silent again, like nothing had ever happened, like the planet had returned to death. But the silence was worse now because it wasn't emptiness, it was waiting. No one spoke for several minutes, each scientist staring blankly into space, their minds drowning in the weight of what they just discovered, until the captain finally whispered in a broken voice, "We must report this." But even as he said it, fear twisted his chest because reporting this meant telling the galaxy that humanity, once feared, once powerful, once unstoppable, was not extinct, and the implications were terrifying. If humans were alive, hidden beneath planets, growing, sleeping, waiting, then what were they waiting for? What were they becoming? What would happen if they woke? The crew stared at the dead planet, and for the first time in their lives a world without life felt more terrifying than a world full of monsters, because whatever slept beneath that crust was not a creature, not a myth, but a truth older than every empire in the galaxy. A truth humanity left behind. And as the Luma prepared to leave orbit, the scanner flickered one last time, showing a faint pulse deep underground. The heartbeat had not stopped, it had only slowed, steady, patient, alive. And the captain realized a horrifying reality. They did not discover humanity. When the Luma finally pulled away from Eris 9, no one spoke, no one breathed fully, as if every voice in that ship was trapped in the same silent fear, and even though the dead world was shrinking on the screen, the crew felt as if the heartbeat was still echoing in their bones, like it had imprinted itself inside their minds, and the captain stared at the dark planet with shaking eyes, whispering to himself, "How can something dead hold life?" But deep inside he already knew this was no ordinary life, no simple biological mistake, because the message, "Do not wake us," kept repeating in his thoughts like a warning carved into his soul, and as the ship drifted farther into space, the youngest scientist broke the silence. With a trembling voice, "Should we tell the council?" And the question sent a fresh wave of fear through the room because reporting something like this meant exposing the truth that the galaxy had buried for thousands of years. That humans were not extinct, that humanity had not disappeared, that they were somewhere, somehow alive, and the captain could feel the weight of that responsibility crushing him, because he knew the council was arrogant, proud, hungry for power, and if they learned of this heartbeat they might investigate, they might dig, they might try to take whatever was hidden there. And the thought filled him with dread, but before he could answer, the ship's long-range sensors activated on their own, projecting a strange waveform across the main display, a soft 5-beat pattern, thump, 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 slow, steady, eerily familiar, and the crew gasped when the system translated the signal's frequency, tagging it with a single word from ancient databases. Human. The captain staggered back, clutching the console, because a long-range signal from the core meant something under the planet had reached out, not just to them, but across space, like a whisper trying to be heard, and the screen flickered with repeating pulses, growing stronger, faster, almost like communication, and one scientist leaned forward, voice trembling. "It's reacting to us leaving," and those words filled everyone with a terror deeper than death because they realized the heartbeat wasn't random. It was aware, it was responding. It could sense distance, movement, presence, and suddenly the captain felt like prey walking away from a sleeping predator whose eyes were still half open. And before anyone could process this, the communication deck lit up with an incoming signal. Unidentified, unencrypted, unfiltered, raw, and the crew watched as the screen flashed with static before forming a single phrase written once again in Terran English. You heard US. Every muscle in every body locked, fear slicing through the room like a blade, and the communications officer whispered, barely able to breathe, "It knows we received the message," which meant the intelligence beneath Eris 9 wasn't just alive. It was conscious, alert, aware of technology, aware of language, and worst of all, aware of them, aware that someone had listened, and that realization shattered whatever calm the crew had left. And panic erupted, voices trembling, bodies shaking, and someone cried out, "We have to leave now, we have to run!" And the captain, driven by pure instinct, slammed the command to jump into hyperspace, hoping distance would give them safety. But before the engines could engage, the ship's systems flickered violently, screens going black, lights dying, engines shutting down one by one. And in that crushing darkness, the heartbeat signal boomed louder, like thunder inside their skulls, like something enormous was pushing against the fabric of space itself. And then, everything stopped again, the systems rebooting, lights returning, engines stable, and the ship finally jumped into hyperspace, leaving Eris 9 behind like a nightmare fleeing into memory. But no one felt relieved, because the truth was clear. Nothing on that planet was asleep anymore. When the ship emerged from hyperspace hours later, the crew collapsed into their seats, exhausted, shaking, hearts racing, and for a long moment the only sound was their ragged breathing, until the youngest scientist whispered what everyone feared. If humans are under that planet, how many more worlds are like that? And the silence that followed was suffocating, because Eris 9 could not be the only place. The galaxy was too vast, humanity's history too deep, and if one planet hit a heartbeat, others might hide entire civilizations, entire evolutions, entire truths the Council had erased. And the captain finally forced himself to stand, voice weak, eyes haunted as he said, "We report this, but only what we saw, not the message." Because deep down he understood a terrifying reality. The Council would not respect a warning written in ancient English. They would see a prize, a weapon, a chance to exploit whatever humanity had become, and that greed could awaken something the galaxy was not ready to face. But as the Luma prepared for transmission, every screen on the ship flickered once more, freezing the crew in horror, because the star map projection zoomed in automatically, highlighting the location of Eris 9, then zooming out, revealing dozens of red dots across the galaxy, dozens of planets marked silently, each one matching the same unknown Terran frequency, and slowly, like a whisper crawling through space, one last message appeared beneath the map in quiet, chilling English. When the red dots appeared across the galaxy map, the crew of the Luma felt their hearts collapse into a fear deeper than anything they had ever known. Because those dots were not random, not accidental, not natural. They were locations, coordinates, markers, each one pulsing with the same frequency as the heartbeat beneath Eris 9. And as the map zoomed out farther, more dots appeared, hundreds, thousands, scattered across star systems, hidden beneath frozen moons, dead asteroids, abandoned planets, forgotten worlds, and the realization hit them like a silent scream. Humanity was not hiding on one planet. Humanity was spread across the galaxy, buried, planted, seated like a secret waiting to be discovered. And the youngest scientist whispered with shaking lips, "This isn't a heartbeat, it's a network." And those words broke whatever calm the crew had left, because a network meant design, purpose, planning, intelligence, and worst of all, coordination. And the captain staggered back, gripping the console, his voice barely audible as he whispered, "How long have they been there?" But no one answered, because the truth was too big to speak, too terrifying to accept, that humanity had not vanished by accident, had not died in war, had not gone extinct. They had chosen silence, chosen sleep, chosen to disappear on their own terms, and suddenly every legend the galaxy once mocked, stories of humans evolving, adapting, surviving anything, began to feel real, too real, painfully real, and the crew realized they were staring at proof that humanity had never left the galaxy. The galaxy had simply forgotten to look beneath the surface. Before anyone could react, the star map flickered again, zooming in on one of the dots, highlighting a planet much closer to Council space, a world named Nira 4, and the Luma scanners picked up the same faint pulse coming from its core, the same slow 5-beat rhythm, and panic erupted through the bridge as someone shouted, "It's active! Another one is active!" And alarms blared as the system detected increasing seismic waves across Nira 4, vibrations identical to the first movements beneath Eris 9, and the captain felt his blood run cold, because if one heartbeat waking caused a warning, what would happen if dozens woke at once? Hundreds, thousands, and before he could process the horror, the ship's communication panel lit up with an incoming signal. Not from Eris 9, not from Nira 4, but from every red dot at the same time, a synchronized transmission that filled the air with static and then formed a single chilling sentence in Terran English. "You are not alone in the dark." The words slammed into the crew like a wave of terror, because they didn't feel like a threat. They felt like a reminder, a fact, a truth so ancient and enormous that their minds struggled to hold it, and the communications officer fell to his knees, whispering, "They're talking to each other, they're awake." And the captain stared at the map as more dots began to pulse, faster, brighter, like stars coming to life, and his voice cracked. "They've been asleep for thousands of years. And now, they're waking up." And the weight of that realization crushed every soul in the room, because if these human structures, cocoons, chambers, whatever they were, had been dormant for millennia, then humanity had been planning something long before the Council existed, long before most species evolved, and that meant the galaxy was not ahead of humans, the galaxy was behind them. In a desperate panic, the captain ordered a full transmission to the Galactic Council, sending the basic data. Just the pulse, just the seismic readings, not the messages, not the map, terrified of what might happen if the Council learned the full truth. But as the transmission sent, the ship systems froze and every screen went black except for one, showing the dead planet Eris 9 once again, its crust still broken from their scan. And slowly a glowing crack began to spread across the surface, faint but visible, and the scanners read a surge of energy rising from the core like something enormous was stretching after a long sleep, and the youngest scientist screamed, "We woke it! Eris 9 is waking!" And in that moment everyone realized the horrible truth. The warning "Do not wake US" was not metaphorical, not symbolic. It was literal, and they had ignored it. The crack widened, light spilling through the planet's surface like molten gold, and the Luma's sensors read an energy signature beyond any known scale. Something not mechanical, not electrical, but biological, alive, powerful, ancient, and the captain felt tears burn his eyes as he whispered, "What are humans?" Because whatever was beneath that planet was not the humanity the galaxy remembered, not the fragile species that once walked on Earth, not the simple beings history mocked. This was something else, something evolved, something transformed by time and silence and darkness. And as the crew stared in horror, the glowing crack suddenly stopped, frozen in place, the energy vanished, the heartbeat slowed again, returning to its calm, steady rhythm, as if whatever was beneath the surface had chosen to wait, to be patient, to remain asleep. But before anyone could feel relief, the map zoomed in on the red dots again, and more began to pulse. 10, 20, 50, each one activating in sequence, like a chain reaction, a countdown, and a final message appeared in English, quiet, cold, and terrifying. "We wake when you understand." When the Luma finally sent the partial report to the Galactic Council, the crew hoped for guidance, hoped for wisdom, hoped for someone stronger to take responsibility for the terrifying truth they had uncovered. But instead the response they received was immediate, cold, and filled with hunger rather than caution. Because the Council did not react with fear, they reacted with opportunity, and the captain's heart shattered when he read their command, "Hold position. Do not leave Eris 9. Reinforcements arriving to excavate." Excavation, digging, opening the core, and those words struck the crew with pure horror, because the message "Do not wake US" was still echoing in their minds, still vibrating in their bones, and the youngest scientist, trembling so hard he could barely stand, whispered, "They didn't understand. They think this is a resource." And the captain felt sick, because he knew the truth. The Council didn't believe in warnings, didn't believe in legends, didn't believe in extinction. What they believed in was Control, power, ownership, and if they thought humans were alive beneath the planet, they would not treat them as a threat. They would treat them as property, as a weapon to claim, as something to take. Before the crew could protest, every screen on the ship flickered with a new transmission. Live footage from Council headquarters. Rows of stern leaders, military commanders, scientists, all leaning forward with greedy eyes as they analyzed the data, arguing not about danger, but about how quickly they could open the planet, how they could use whatever humanity had become, and one general laughed, saying, "If humans survived this long underground, imagine what we could extract." And the captain slammed his fist against the console, voice breaking, "They don't understand. We're not dealing with a species that needs saving or controlling. They're beyond us." But no one listened, no one cared, and the council ended the transmission with a final order: prepare coordinates for drilling crews. Then the screen went dark. The Luma fell into a suffocating silence as the crew stared at each other, their fear transforming into something heavier, guilt, because they were the ones who found Eris 9. They were the ones who scanned it. They were the ones who woke the heartbeat. They were the spark that lit a fuse the galaxy was not ready for, and the captain whispered, voice cracking, "This is our fault?" And no one argued, because deep down they all felt the same weight, the same crushing realization that curiosity had opened a door that should have stayed sealed forever. But before despair could fully take them, a sudden alarm blared through the ship, panels flashing red, and the map zoomed in automatically. Not on Eris 9, not on Nera 4, but on a new one that hadn't been active before, one pulsing faster than all the others, glowing bright crimson as seismic readings skyrocketed beneath its surface, and the system tagged the location in chilling text. Chum 01, Seed World, and the captain's blood turned to ice when he saw the coordinates, because they were not in distant space, not in an uncharted system, but inside the Council's own territory, on a lifeless moon they had mined for centuries, and the realization hit them like a knife. Humanity was not buried far away. Humanity was buried under their feet. The crew watched as the moon's surface began to tremble, faint at first, then stronger, like something massive was pushing upward from deep below, and sensors screamed warning after warning. Energy spike, tectonic shift, unknown life signature rising, and the youngest scientist collapsed into his chair, whispering, "We triggered them, waking is spreading. Because if one seed woke, the others might follow, a chain reaction across the galaxy, and the Luma was no longer observing a mystery. They were trapped in the beginning of a transformation." Desperate, the captain tried sending a new message to the Council, begging them to stop, to retreat, to leave the seeds untouched, but the transmission refused to send. The system blocked, overridden by an unknown source, and suddenly every screen went black, every light died, every sound vanished, plunging the ship into total darkness, until a single phrase appeared in white letters across every display, written once again in Terran English. "You learned too slow." The crew stared at the words, their breath frozen in their throats, and then the screens shifted, showing a live feed from the moon, where the ground split open like a wound, revealing an enormous metallic cocoon glowing with white light, pulsing like a giant heart, and inside its translucent shell a shape moved, humanoid, tall, terrifyingly still. And the captain felt his soul tremble as he whispered, "One of them is waking." And right then, as if answering his voice, the figure inside the cocoon slowly opened its eyes brighter than stars, eyes that saw not confusion, not fear, but awareness, recognition, intelligence. And the cocoon shattered with a sound that echoed across the comms like thunder. The moment the cocoon shattered, the universe seemed to stop breathing, as if time itself held still to witness something it was never meant to see, and the figure that stepped out onto the cracked moon surface did not move like a newborn or stumble like something waking from ages of sleep. Instead it stood tall, steady, silent, its body humanoid but impossibly perfect, skin pale like polished metal, muscles shaped like living armor, and its eyes, glowing with a cold white light, scanned the horizon with calm intelligence, not curiosity, not confusion, but recognition, as if it remembered everything, as if it had always been aware, even while sealed beneath the moon. And aboard the Luma, the crew watched in paralyzed terror as the scanners tried to identify it. But the results came back unreadable again and again, repeating the same line. Species, Terran evolution level, unknown, and those words shattered whatever hope they had left, because this was not the humanity the galaxy once knew, fragile and emotional and mortal. This was something new, something beyond mortal limits, something humanity had become in silence, and the captain whispered, voice shaking, "This isn't a human, this is what humans became." And the youngest scientist grabbed the console, tears in his eyes, whispering, "We should never have looked, we should never have dug." Down on the moon, the humanoid figure finally took its first step, and the ground rippled beneath its foot like it was responding to its presence, as if the planet itself recognized its return. And then the being lifted its head and stared directly into the sky, directly toward the Luma's position, despite the impossible distance, despite the darkness of space, despite the ship being invisible to normal sight. And every crew member felt the weight of that gaze like a hand around their throat. A silent declaration that they were seen, known, judged, and before anyone could move, a soft vibration echoed through the ship. Not sound, not signal, but something deeper, like a pulse inside their bones, and suddenly every speaker on the Luma turned on by itself, hissing with static before forming a single, calm human voice speaking perfect Terran English. Observation confirmed. The captain stumbled back, heart pounding, because extinct species did not speak, did not announce, did not communicate in such controlled, emotionless tones. And the voice continued, each word slow and chilling. Stage 1 complete. Then the moon shook violently, the ground splitting wider as enormous cracks stretched across its surface, and the scanners detected more life signatures, thousands, hundreds of thousands. Still underground, still asleep, still cocooned, but stirring, moving, reacting to the first awakening, and the Luma's alarms screamed warnings, reading seismic activity that could tear the moon apart, and the youngest scientist broke into sobs, whispering, "It's a chain reaction, one waking triggers the rest." And the captain finally understood the terrible truth humanity had hidden. They were not evolving one being at a time, they were evolving as a collective, a species-wide transformation, synchronized across planets, across moons, across the galaxy. Suddenly, every screen aboard the Luma flickered, and a new map appeared, far more detailed than before, showing not thousands but millions of red dots across the universe, each dot labeled with a Terran marker, each one pulsing brighter and faster. And at the bottom of the map appeared a countdown, slow, steady, relentless. And the crew realized with horror that this was not a random awakening, not an accident, not a response to discovery. This was a schedule, a timeline humanity had created long before aliens ever evolved, and one scientist managed to choke out, "They planned this thousands of years ago." And the captain's knees buckled under the weight of that truth, because it meant the galaxy had never been in control, had never been ahead, had never been safe. Humanity had been orchestrating their evolution while everyone else lived blindly above them. On the moon, the awakened being raised its hand, and a radiant pulse shot into the sky, harmless but colossal, spreading across space like a silent wave, passing through every ship, every station, every colony, and the moment it touched the Luma, every crew member felt the same sensation. A cold whisper inside their minds, not spoken through ears but carved directly into thought, a message that froze their hearts. "We are returning." The words repeated, heavier, deeper, unstoppable. "We are returning." And the captain collapsed to his knees, clutching his head as tears rolled down his face, whispering, "Returning to what? Returning to who?" But the voice did not explain, did not clarify, did not reassure. Instead it faded into silence, as the being lowered its hand and looked once more toward the stars, its glowing eyes reflecting a destiny older than every empire in existence. And in that crushing silence, the Luma's engines shut down again, not by malfunction, but by force, overridden as a final message appeared across every screen in the same cold English letters. The Luma drifted helplessly in the cold void, its engines dead, its systems frozen, its lights flickering like a dying heartbeat, and every crew member sat trapped in a silence so heavy it felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. Because the message, "When we rise, the galaxy will remember what humanity really is," echoed in their minds like a prophecy carved into their bones, and no one could stop imagining what that meant, what humanity really was, what truth the galaxy had forgotten, or what nightmare was waiting beneath those millions of red dots. And as the crew trembled, the scanners suddenly powered back on for a brief moment, displaying live footage from the moon's surface, where the awakened human figure now stood motionless, staring into the void as cracks continued. Spreading around it like a massive web, an energy surged beneath the surface, seismic readings spiking higher than anything recorded in history, and the captain watched with hollow eyes as more cocoons deep underground flickered with light, pulsing like millions of unborn stars preparing to ignite, and he whispered in a voice so small it barely existed, "This isn't evolution, this is a rebirth." And the youngest scientist, shaking violently, whispered back, "Or a return." And the weight of those two words, rebirth and return, felt like a blade pressed against the throat of the whole galaxy. Before anyone could speak again, the ship's comms burst to life with an emergency signal from the Galactic Council. Their voices frantic, scrambling, terrified, shouting over each other, trying to make sense of the sudden awakenings across multiple moons and dead planets. But amidst the chaos, one voice rose above the rest, the Supreme Chancellor. Now stripped of arrogance, stripped of pride, speaking with raw fear as he shouted, "We can't stop it. They're waking everywhere." And behind him screens showed live feeds of different worlds shaking, glowing, opening, revealing more cocoons and more humanoid shadows inside them, unmoving but alive. And for the first time in recorded history, the council did not look like leaders. They looked like children who had finally seen the monster hiding under their bed, and the Chancellor begged the Luma's crew to provide more data, to explain what they had seen, to help them understand. But the captain could only stare at the screen, tears in his eyes, because there was nothing left to explain. The truth was already unfolding, and the council was powerless to stop it. Then, without warning, every screen in the council chamber went black, every live feed shut down, every transmission cut, and the only thing left was a single message, white, silent, terrifying, projected across their main display in Terran English. "Do not interfere," and the room fell apart in panic as leaders screamed, guards drew weapons, alarms blared, and entire civilizations across the galaxy watched as their governments lost control. But the message was not meant to intimidate, it was meant to inform, to warn, to declare that humanity was not asking for permission or negotiation or discussion. They were commanding distance, commanding silence, commanding respect, and even though the council tried to send ships to investigate, every vessel that approached an awakening site lost power instantly and drifted away, rejected like insects touching a flame, proving that humanity's control was not limited to one moon or one planet. It stretched across space like an invisible shield, a field of dominance that no technology could breach. Back aboard the Luma, the crew stared as the awakened being on the moon slowly raised its head again, and for the first time it spoke. Not through speakers, not through screens, but through every mind watching, every consciousness connected to the signal. A voice calm and emotionless filling their thoughts. "We are not what you remember." And the captain gasped as the voice continued. "We were never primitive. We were never weak. We were never alone." And with each sentence the crew felt something deeper than fear. Something like awe, like witnessing a truth too large for any one species to hold. And then the voice delivered the final blow, the truth that shattered the last illusion the galaxy held about itself. "We did not leave the galaxy. The galaxy was left behind." Those words hit like a supernova, because they implied something unthinkable, that humanity had moved forward while everyone else stayed behind, that humanity had evolved beyond the galaxy's understanding long before going silent, that humans had not disappeared because they lost. They disappeared because they outgrew everyone else, and as the voice faded, the being on the moon slowly turned away, walking toward the glowing fissure in the ground, stepping into the light like returning to a home the universe had never known existed, and with its departure the moon fell silent again, the cracks sealing, the light fading, the seismic readings dropping, and the cocoon fields quieting. Like the awakening was only a test, a preview, a whisper of what was coming. The Luma shot through space in a desperate flight, engines burning at maximum power, but no one on board felt safe, no one felt relief, because even as the stars streaked past their windows, the crew could still hear that final message inside their minds. When the last seed wakes, all will know what humanity really is. And those words clung to their thoughts like a shadow that refused to let go. A promise too big, too final, too terrifying, and the captain stared blankly ahead, hands trembling on the controls, knowing deep in his soul that they were not running away from danger. They were running ahead of something unstoppable, something ancient, something planned long before their species ever learned to walk. And he whispered, voice cracking, "We are living in the middle of their timeline." And the words sent cold realization through the crew because they finally understood that humanity hadn't just survived. They had prepared, organized, planted themselves across the galaxy like seeds waiting for the right moment to rise, and maybe that moment wasn't random, wasn't accidental. It was approaching, like a countdown no one could stop. The ship's sensors flickered again, this time showing terrifying new readings. More red dots activating across the galaxy. Faster than before, dozens turning bright in seconds, then hundreds, their pulses synchronizing like a single heartbeat spread across the stars, and the Luma's science officer gasped, collapsing into his chair as he whispered, "They're linking, they're forming a network." And the captain felt his heart stop, because if every seed, every cocoon, every buried human structure was connecting, then humanity wasn't waking in isolated places. They were waking together as one singular intelligence, one species-wide mind, one unified evolution, and that kind of unity made every empire, every council, every army in the galaxy look like toys scattered across the floor of something far greater. Suddenly, a new transmission cut through the silence. Not from the council, not from a planet, but from deep space itself, a raw broadcast coming from no single point but everywhere at once, vibrating through every ship and station in the galaxy, forcing every being to stop, to listen, to freeze, and then the voice returned. The same calm, emotionless Terran voice that had spoken from the moon, but now louder, deeper, echoing across systems. The galaxy fears what it does not understand. And millions of beings fell silent, breath stolen from their lungs, as the voice continued. You believed humanity was fragile. You believed humanity was gone. You believed humanity was beneath you. And the words were not angry, not mocking, but painfully factual, like reading a history the galaxy wanted to forget. And then the voice sharpened, quiet but sharp enough to cut through every soul listening. You were wrong. Inside the council chamber, the leaders watched as every screen in their war room flickered to life, showing the red dots pulsing like stars being born, and the chancellor collapsed into his chair, whispering in horror. We never understood them. We never knew what humans truly were. And the old archivists began digging through ancient records, desperate to find anything that could explain this nightmare, and that was when one forgotten document surfaced, older than the council itself, written long before most civilizations existed. A transcript from humanity's final transmission before their disappearance, and as the chancellor read it aloud, his voice broke, because it said only one line. We leave not to escape, but to become. And the room erupted in terror, because it meant that humanity's silence was not retreat, not weakness, it was transformation. Back aboard the Luma, the countdown appeared again. Not on their screens, but in the sky itself, projected across the stars like enormous burning numbers counting down from a number so large it seemed impossible, and the youngest scientist sobbed, whispering, "This is their clock, their awakening, their return." And the captain felt darkness settle over his heart, because he understood the final truth. This countdown was not waiting for the galaxy to act, not waiting for permission, not waiting for fear to fade. It was waiting for the last seed, the final cocoon, the final human sleeper to awaken. And when that happened, whatever humanity truly was would no longer be hidden. Then, suddenly, every red dot pulsed at the exact same moment. A shockwave firing through deep space, harmless but massive, making stars flicker and planets quake, and every being who felt it dropped to their knees, clutching their heads, shaking, crying, because in that pulse they heard one final whisper, not spoken aloud, but felt inside their souls, a whisper that carried the weight of destiny as the last whisper faded into the cold darkness of space. The Luma drifted in stunned silence, the crew frozen in a moment that felt bigger than life, bigger than history, bigger than every species that had ever existed, because now they understood with crushing clarity that they weren't witnessing the end of a mystery. They were witnessing the beginning of a new era, an era shaped not by the Galactic Council or alien empires, but by a species that had vanished only to return as something the universe could no longer measure or contain, and as the countdown continued glowing across the stars. Like a burning scar, the captain stared helplessly at the numbers, knowing that every second that passed brought the galaxy closer to a moment no one could stop, no one could fight, no one could undo, and fear wrapped itself around his heart like ice as he whispered, "When the last seed wakes, everything will change." And even speaking it felt like a crime, like saying the truth out loud made it more real. Suddenly, the ship shook violently. Not from impact, not from attack, but from a surge of energy so massive it bent space around them, and every alarm screamed in agony as scanners detected an impossible spike coming from the farthest edge of the galaxy. A region no one had ever explored, a blank space on every map, and slowly the display zoomed out, revealing a single red dot pulsing brighter than all the rest, larger, louder, faster. As if it were the heart of the entire network, the first seed, the last seed, the origin of everything, and the system labeled it with a name that made every breath stop. Sol-01, Terran Prime. The crew gasped, because the name Sol was not unknown. It was the ancient name of the system humans once called home, the birthplace of Earth, the cradle of humanity, and the realization tore through them like lightning. Humanity's final awakening was not buried on a moon or a dead world. It was buried on the world they abandoned, the world no one had seen in thousands of years, Earth itself, and the youngest scientist whispered through trembling lips, "Earth wasn't destroyed. It was sleeping." Too, and tears filled his eyes because now everything made sense. The silence, the disappearance, the network. Earth hadn't fallen. Earth had become the core of a dormant species waiting for the right moment to rise. Before anyone could speak, the countdown began to accelerate, numbers racing faster and faster, and every red seed across the galaxy pulsed in perfect synchronization, sending shockwaves through space that shook stars and made ancient moons crack open, and the Council watched in horror as every military fleet, every weapon, every ship failed when approaching the seeds, shutting down, powerless, rejected by invisible Terran force, proving the galaxy was no longer in control of its own future. And then everything stopped. The countdown froze at 0. Every light across the star map went dark. Every pulse went silent. Every planet fell still. The universe held its breath like creation itself was waiting. And in that chilling, absolute silence, the stars over Sol-01 exploded with blinding white light. Not destruction, but activation. As a colossal structure emerged from the darkness, rising behind the system like a metal sunrise, larger than any fleet, any station, any moon. An enormous Terran construct shaped like a ring of living metal, glowing with veins of white energy, humming like a heartbeat magnified 1,000 times, and the Luma scanners broke trying to measure it, labeling it with only one word: humanity. The ring pulsed once, and every seed across the galaxy answered, lighting up again, brighter than before, like millions of voices awakening in unison. And suddenly the same calm Terran voice returned, but now deeper, older, filled with power beyond anything mortal, speaking not to the Luma, not to the Council, but to every mind across the universe. "We have awakened." Panic and awe rippled across every civilization as the voice continued. "We remember what we were. We know what we became. We rise for what comes next." And the captain felt every hair on his body stand up because those words didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like destiny. Then the stars shifted, space bent, and every seed began to lift from their planets, rising into orbit like an army of shining cocoons returning to their origin, drawn toward Sol-01, toward Earth, toward Terran Prime, forming streams of light across the galaxy like rivers of awakening life converging into one impossible future. And the voice spoke one final time, quiet but infinite. This galaxy was only the beginning. The light flared, the seeds vanished into the Terran ring, and in the last silent moment before the transmission ended, the Luma's crew finally understood the truth the universe had forgotten. Humanity had never been meant to rule a single galaxy. Humanity had evolved for something far greater. And as the ring closed and the stars returned to darkness, one final message appeared in white, unbroken Terran English, simple, final, undeniable.